Good evening to all of you from India. Good morning to people in the United States, and late evening for people in other parts of the world as well. We are on the second day of this global virtual conference on reimagining and transforming the future of law schools and legal education. We are on the 16th thematic session on the theme relevance of interdisciplinary legal studies during the pandemic. We have a very distinguished group of individuals who have dedicated their life and indeed making significant contributions to the pursuit of interdisciplinary legal studies. I would like to briefly introduce them. We have Professor Dr. Soledad Atienza, Dean of the Law School at IE University in Spain. We have Professor Carolyn Coles, Senior Lecturer and International Convener, ASTON Law School in United Kingdom. We have Professor Tom Brooks, Dean of the Durham Law School, Durham University in the United Kingdom. We have Professor DEEPANSHU Mohan, my own colleague, Associate Professor at the Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities, Professor Dr. B.B. Pande, Research Professor of Law at Jindal Global Law School at Jindal Global University, and of course, my very distinguished colleague, Professor Dr. GITANJALI Surendran, who teaches at the Jindal Global Law School, a historian who will be moderating this session. Thank you very much, and I'm going to hand this over to GITANJALI.
I was about to say good evening, but it's true that everybody's in a slightly different time zone. So let me, rephrase that to a very warm welcome to all of you for this panel on the relevance of interdisciplinary legal studies during the pandemic and after as well. I'm going to sort of jump straight into a very brief introduction to the panel itself, and then we'll get on to with the business of hearing these very distinguished panelists. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. So there's no doubt that, of course, this whole period of the pandemic has thrown a lot of our certitudes, our certainties sort of out the window. And we are facing unprecedented challenges when it comes to, to various institutions, to the pressures on our social, economic, and political structures, etc. What is clear, though, is that if we're to solve any of these things, then we do need, sort of massive efforts on the parts of researchers, public policy experts, government, non-government, people from a wide sort of variety of fields. For instance, just when we're thinking about the vaccine itself, that's dependent on the free sharing of clinical surveillance geospatial data. You again need people from the fields of biomedical sciences and intellectual property rights regimes, people who are aware of these things to come together and start thinking about, how to move forward, how to do some of this data sharing, etc. And of course, then after that, after the vaccine's actually created, there's a sort of business of patents, and then there's the business of distributing it and, figuring out how it's to reach the people it's to reach, costing, etc. So, I think in a sense, what's going to come when that vaccine is finally out, or when those vaccines are finally out, is something that we've never really witnessed in history, and it's going to require enormous amounts of collaboration across the board. But this isn't the only wicked problem we're facing right now, right? We have the issues of environmental degradation. I'm sitting in Delhi. I know a lot of people in the audience may be sitting in Delhi as well. And we're facing the sort of twin problems of the pandemic and pollution, both of which are sort of exacerbating each other in a way. And there's no way that any of these issues around climate change and environmental degradation would remotely be solved without this kind of interdisciplinarity, or anyway these teams of people coming together. And how's that going to happen? And in a way, the discussion that we're going to have today around these kinds of promoting interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity in the arena of legal studies, but also further afield in academia in general, would certainly be an important step. We've been talking about it, I think, for decades. The question now is, how do we make it happen? How are we thinking about this in the context of the problems that we face today? I'm going to ask each of the speakers to kind of respond to the different questions that we have for them. And then at the end, there will be some audience questions as well. I'm going to actually ask you all to try and limit your remarks to 3 or 4 minutes, because there are a number of questions and there are a number of you, and we want to be able to hear all of you. And I'm going to apologize in advance if I have to interrupt you at some point. So, many apologies. I'm going to put up this badly mirrored, note at some point to say you have 1 minute left. I think you get the idea. So please do keep an eye on me. I'll do a little bit of timing. We have to end 5 minutes early, but I'm hoping that we can get as many questions and as many responses from all of you. So just to throw out that first question. So what do you feel are some of these challenges? Of course, the pandemic being the most obvious one, but of course there are many others. What are the kinds of problems you think would benefit from an interdisciplinary legal studies kind of approach? Can I ask, shall we just start with a certain kind of order? Can I ask Professor Coles to begin? And then we can move on to Professor Brooks, DEEPANSHU, Professor ATIENZA, and then Professor Pande.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Well, I think some of the challenges are also actually our strengths of interdisciplinary research, because some of the challenges are the different philosophies that are coming from the different research areas. My own area is intellectual property law. So when you think of the example that you've just mentioned there of patents, of course we need the pure scientists who are doing this wonderful work at the moment with their highly specialist knowledge. But then also we do have the views of the commercial people, which is maybe different issues with COVID, and that's is having an impact. But it's always there, this balance of if we didn't have the funding and the money, if these things weren't commercially viable, how long-term can this pure science and this expertise develop? So it is a balance. And then the third element is, of course, the ethics of all that. The ethics of what do we develop, how do we develop it, and how do we apportion the money? So in that way, I think the challenges of those three areas, from what I see in my area of intellectual property, are also our strengths, because then as a lawyer, but also a past brand manager in my diverse career, seeing the views of different people help us solve the problems. These are global problems across so many different disciplines: technical, ethical, financial, and therefore we need the researchers to come together. So these challenges are also our strengths driving interdisciplinary research. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Can I ask Professor Brooks actually to also respond? Actually, Professor Brooks is in a sort of uniquely interesting position here, because you're also a professor of law and governance, but you've also worked on philosophy and public policy and a whole bunch of other things. So please go ahead.
Indeed. Well, listen, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be part of this. So in terms of kind of general interdisciplinarity, I think that that's hugely important. You know, law is, of course, laws of different things, laws about how constitutions work, laws about intellectual property, laws of other things. And so I think that law is a kind of not uniquely interdisciplinary type of project. I think many are in a similar type of situation, but it's a thorough-going type of interdisciplinary project that combines all the different areas that Caroline so rightly identified. I agree with everything that she said about this. I think when I think about COVID and what it's changed, or what might be different, or how it affects things, of course there's the issues that were raised. I won't repeat them, but there's then something else that I think is also worth noting in my 3 minutes or less. Putting my hat on as the dean of a law school, is that my law school, like yours, is very international. We have a lot of international staff. We have a lot of international students. And often the way we've taught folks have focused almost exclusively about qualifying people to do stuff right here. Now that's troubled me as someone who's an immigrant, who's not from Britain, how can our international students be a strength beyond the fact of various fee things or people in the room kind of stuff, something kind of more substantive, something more that makes them better lawyers. And I think one thing that's been interesting about the COVID situation is it's really kind of brought to the fore not only the, I don't want to call it reliance, but the deep integration of international people as staff, as students, as users in our communities of our universities. A very big thing. I had a lot of staff who wanted to get home. I have some whose families are abroad. I had students who wanted to travel to different places. But then thinking about these challenges, thinking about these problems, of course, is international. And so part of the interdisciplinarity we might think is thinking about the law of England and how it could be helped by philosophy, political science, other things. I think that's true. We can say more about that, or the laws relating in India and other things. Yeah, sure, maybe that's true too. But that we do not act, our legal systems do not act independently of others. And I'm not thinking even of international law. I'm thinking about our students coming to grips with the different legal systems, that it matters what the law is in commercial law, matters in the United States and in China and in India and elsewhere. It's not just kind of international level of some kind of, don't call it same playing field, it's not, but having some kind of level like this, but it's also the different systems and ways of thinking that are important, not just for kind of being better lawyers about, thinking more deeply and broadly about contract, criminal, family law, other things, or whatever the domestic area of law is, but also thinking about challenges like this, whether it be intellectual property or other things. You get that vaccine, that's great. How do we get the licensing and so on across different jurisdictions? How do we do that? So the interdisciplinary interlegal system, I don't know what the word is, systemicity. I'll leave it to others. That's me, I'm done, thank you.
Thanks. Can I ask Deepanshu to jump in?
Right, thank you. Well, I'll start by saying that maybe, I mean, and the word interdisciplinarity echoes so many times in the conversations we have on a day-to-day basis in everything that we're doing, is that I was wondering if we could probably go a step back and look at, and that's what shocks do. My training initially in the discipline of economics was focused in research a lot on looking at economic crises and how they shape new paradigms of theoretical edifices, right? Like, what kind of macroeconomics works in a certain environment, what doesn't work, how does it intersect with areas of regulation, policy response. And one of the things that often brought me back with every shock that would happen is the true insights or the roots of interdisciplinarity lay down in a fundamental deepening of knowledge within the discipline. That is, that intradisciplinarity paves the way for the way disciplines evolve. And what I mean by that is, and I think I'll just use a concept from the work of Karl Polanyi in The Great Transformation. And this is something which I wrote about in a paper last year, where the idea of embeddedness, right, which tries to look at the actions of individuals, economic, legal, or systems, as always part of and parcel of networks of social relations, right? The moment we start looking at disciplines and structures of knowledge creation, right, and pillars of knowledge creation from an embedded perspective, I think it helps you a lot, whether it's particularly in areas of public policy. The way I'm seeing and understanding is that most lawyers, let's say, are far more interested in the procedural and institutional parameters of functioning of, and I can come back to this later, on what parameters of law and order would mean. Economists are largely looking at, and the way I see it, and particularly within the discipline, is on the methodological tools of how we are doing impact assessment, how we are analyzing. And the focus of that does not bring a more embedded perspective out of the sociology of relations or the context in which we are staying. And what the pandemic has done is thrown the fault lines of a very deeply heterogeneous, polarized, even stratified society right out in the open, right? It's asking us some of the most fundamental questions, whether our knowledge, our processes of knowledge creation in any way are actually rooted or embedded in the culture or in the social context in which we are staying. And I'd probably argue that that's not the case. In fact, what we are facing as a problem, which the question tries to ask, is a disembedded view of law. It's disembedded from other fields and branches of social sciences. There is a conscious effort. I see that happening a lot at Jindal, that there is cross communication across, and I've learned tremendously from legal scholars, jurists, and I would say historians like GITANJALI herself, to know and understand how we go back and look at frameworks that can help us develop perspectives that are not perceived to consequentially be inclusive, but are inclusive in the way in which we start working, right? And I think that's something which we really need to. I have a few examples and illustrations, but let me come back to this as we expand upon this.
Thanks very much. Sorry, can you all hear me? Thanks very much, Deepanshu. Yeah, I mean, a historian often would approach a law and order kind of issue in terms of social crime, perhaps, and thinking about other. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a very well taken point, that you think about the knowledge in context. What does it do? And, you know, are we, what is our distance from subjects and distance from our particular lived situations or the lived situations of our subjects? Thank you. Professor Atienza, would you like to jump in?
Thank you very much to Jindal University for organizing this fantastic conference and for inviting me to debate on this topic, which I think is of particular relevance for law schools. And of course, we're talking about interdisciplinary, so this affects all disciplines. But I think in particular, the law cannot be taught in isolation from other disciplines. And this is the reason why it is of particular interest to us. And I would like to approach this interdisciplinary aspect maybe from a different point of view, which is the what are the challenges and how can we promote teaching programs that are more interdisciplinary? I think the biggest challenge to teaching law programs that are interdisciplinary is the regulation. It is the academic regulation and the regulation to access the legal profession. This is what makes many law schools design programs that are fully and only legal, that only comprehend legal aspects and do not include other disciplines. Now, one way to overcome this challenge is what many law schools are already doing, which is launching either dual degrees in law and in another discipline, or what I believe is more sophisticated, more complex, and even more reaching, which is multidisciplinary programs, such as the traditional PPE in philosophy, politics, and economics, or PLE in politics, law, and economics. These kind of programs are designed to offer very ambitious students who are looking for a very comprehensive and a very open and wide training, the education that will allow them to try to analyze and to solve problems from the different perspectives. And this is precisely what the pandemic has, I believe, made even more clear for us, that current complex world problems cannot be solved only from one perspective. They must be seen from the legal perspective as well as from the political one and the economic one, or from the social perspective as well as from the labor one and from the economic one. So I think the pandemic has only made us see even closer how we need to bring disciplines together, and we need to try to train the future professionals, and in particular the future legal professionals, with this multidisciplinary approach. And I very much agree with what Professor Brooks was saying about the international approach, because I think the international legal education makes us closer to a more multidisciplinary legal education. And the term that Professor Brooks was mentioning, interlegal system education, I call this multi-jurisdictional education. So the more we can train students to understand other legal systems, either by teaching international law, transnational law, comparative law, or by teaching additionally other legal systems to their own legal system, this will enrich the training of the students, and it will prepare them to practice the law with a more multidisciplinary aspect.
Thank you so much, Professor Atienza. Can I ask Professor Pandey to jump in here?
Yes,
yeah.
Gitanjali, I come in here. I have a different take from the point of view of law. The pandemic has taught us 4 areas for interdisciplinary knowledge. The first area is healthcare and patients' rights. The second area is again right-centric on healthcare providers' rights. The third area is economic and social fallouts resulting from lockouts and massive unemployments. And the fourth, which is very typical in India as a fallout, is domestic tensions and domestic violence rise in them because of resulting from lockouts and massive unemployments. Now these 4 fallouts have, from the point of view of law, important issues arise. The remedies that law has so far in respect of these 4 areas is on equality. There is a growing disparity in the field of employment rights, in the field of even education. Many of those who cannot afford this web-based education are excluded from educational benefits. And this will have far-reaching implications for equality in the future days to come. The second is rights, constitutional rights and statutory rights. That issue flows from, and the remedies seem to have limited import. This came to light in the case of a great migrant march in India, and for 7 weeks, even the Supreme Court that denied that they have any rights. But after 7 weeks, the Supreme Court took suo motu cognizance and started rattling out rights of the migrant marchers who were, as if on account of lockouts, as a fallout of COVID. Then the third is justice issue. Justice in domestic violence cases, justice in unemployment cases, new dimensions of justice are opening up. And the roots of these injustices, these violences that are hidden in the society have to be, can be exposed only with interdisciplinary knowledge, and knowledge from all sources will have to come in. Now, this has importance also for human rights issues. Unless you see them as human rights problems, they have very limited in many countries. They would say that it's a clashing with sovereignty. We have a right to control them the way we want, but it's a human right of all people to be given healthcare rights, to be given employment rights, to be given violence, domestic violence, tensions, release them from tensions. So these are the issues that are very important for interdisciplinary legal studies. And I would come in, Gitanjali, later on. These interdisciplinary legal studies have at least three, from the perception of the knowledge dispenser. Knowledge dispenser will generate knowledge, will bring in different viewpoints in their new knowledge of legal studies. Then knowledge managers, those who are running the institutions, they have different roles to play. And then knowledge receivers, students who are to read these interdisciplinary legal studies, they have to look for a different kind of insight into the subjects, traditional subjects. And I said, COVID has come as a blessing. Blessing because legal studies had become, law is a autonomous system. Therefore, and within the autonomous legal system, different subjects have their different boundaries, and we'll study them, we'll teach them as per these boundaries. But COVID has taught us that these boundaries have to break down. New boundaries, new lines have to be created. And this is a great advantage of pandemic. I think a blessing of the pandemic. Thank you. I'll come in again later on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Pandey. Actually, right at the beginning, I think Professor Coles had said that there is a way in which, what was the exact word that you had used, that we need to, we don't necessarily need to see the pandemic as a, of course it is a crisis, but the challenges could also throw up something positive from them. You had used a different word, which I haven't picked up on. Anyway, I think this is a good moment for us to think about, think more deeply about the question, or reflect more deeply on the question of legal education, in fact. I think, as I mentioned earlier, interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, these words have been around for a long time. We've been talking about it for a long time. And in Jindal and other places in India, we have the BA LLB program somewhat as an outcome of this. A 5-year program that brings together BA subjects, as well as, they have to do a certain number of BA subjects, actually a large number of BA subjects, as well as their 3-year LLB. So that was, I think, that envisioned something like this. For better or for worse. But I think disciplinary boundaries have shown a great resistance to being knocked down, or to really softening up, as it were. So quite with as much granularity as you feel you wish to suggest. How do we make interdisciplinarity happen in a law school? And how, and sort of tagging on with that, how do we encourage collaboration? That's another thing that I think in Jindal we think about very often is, how do we think about collaborating across in terms of research? How do we, across fields, how do we think about teamwork even? Let me open that. Perhaps we can start with Professor Atienza, since you were talking quite squarely about the sort of law school program, a multidisciplinary law school program, and the challenges.
Thank you. I believe that in order to promote a more interdisciplinary research, and to promote what I was mentioning, to design and to offer more interdisciplinary programs, the main thing is to have this as part of the strategy and the plan of the university and the law school. Now, once this is at the core, and once this is one of the principles and the values of the school, I think there's two different lines. In order to promote interdisciplinary research, each institution needs to design a plan that creates the right environment, as well as gives incentives to faculty in order to do this. So the situation for many academic institutions is that law schools, as well as other parts of the university, as other schools, are silos, and they work independently as an autonomous institution within a larger institution. So if the law school does not design a plan to put faculty together, to have to build a stronger relationship, to communicate with other faculty members, this is not going to happen. Now, once the school designs a plan for joining seminars, for workshops, that creates the right environment for them to talk and to be able to reach points of connection, points of interaction among faculty from different disciplines. This will be more likely to happen. The other part, as I mentioned, is the incentives, to give some incentives to faculty if this is what the institution needs to promote. What the pandemic, I think, has done in this area is that these very challenging times that we are all living has made many institutions and many people really have an aim to cooperate and to help one another. So in many institutions, we have seen teams or departments or schools that were working on their own in a very independent way had to reach out to other schools, to other departments, or even to other universities, even to their competitors, both to ask for help and to offer help. And I think we have seen some very positive examples of this during the pandemic. So if we could create this environment of cooperation among the law schools, that would help us to promote the interdisciplinary research. And in terms of teaching, of training, as I mentioned before, the more programs that we can design from scratch, from this either dual degree program approach or even more sophisticated multidisciplinary programs approach, this will also make faculty work together in those programs and will also enable for more opportunities for doing joint research.
Thank you. Yeah, so research environments, I think, are absolutely key to getting faculty to collaborate. I completely agree with you there. Professor Brooks, would you like to come in?
Well, I agree with that too. So, but let me try not to, again, let me try to say something that isn't just repeating things and try to have something a bit different. So but complementary. So one kind of model or one way of approaching this that I like to think about is and kind of some models of how law schools have been created and thinking about what our mission is. And then getting clear about what our mission is, and then using that to think more clearly about how we best achieve that mission and strategy. And I think that's a kind of a direct route towards the more interdisciplinarity angle, and also thinking about branching and connecting with other legal systems now as well. So very briefly, again, in my time, so there's one kind of model of kind of an academic only, thinking about the law degree as an academic qualification primarily. That's what it does. A model you see in Europe, I think going back to Bologna about 1,000 years ago, the oldest in Europe program, and where it was an academic degree run and organized and managed very well, but like any other program, like it was philosophy, like it was history. And so while it cared very much about recruiting people, a qualification was the main goal. A lot of attractions to that. We're all academics. We all care about the higher study of law and kind of digging in. The problem, of course, is if it's too esoteric, then we have this kind of wonderful theories that are theories about theories and that are not as connected to the world as it might be. The other model, another way of thinking about it, is something, and that way of thinking about law as a qualification, more purely academic exercise, has its roots in a kind of what I've seen, a more continental European way of thinking about how law degrees work and how they're organized. And when I travel to the continent to discuss with other deans what they're doing at their schools, and I ask questions about what partnerships they have with firms and with the bar and other types of things that they have in their countries, I get these kind of bizarre looks like, what do you mean? We stay on campus. My main job is sitting in my department, just like the head of philosophy, just like the head of history, just like the head of physics. I stay here and I manage my staff. I don't go to the big cities and talk to law firms and try to get money from them and placements and try to replicate anything they do. That's dirty. That's not academic. That's not what we do. That's wrong. It's not what we do. That's what I often hear. And the same thing happens a lot across the UK, to be fair. I'm not throwing stones at a glass house. The other side is, I don't want to say better, but I'm going to say different, is it goes too far the other way. So in my home state of Connecticut, I'm from New Haven, there's a law school called Yale. About 40-minute commute from there is a spot called Litchfield. And Litchfield Law School was one of the oldest in the common law jurisdictions. You can visit the museum in Litchfield Law School, but sorry, no one's had a visiting appointment there. They're not around because they've been closed for a very long time. They've got two former vice presidents who were graduates. They didn't do qualifications. They didn't do degrees. The purpose of a law school was about an apprenticeship. If you couldn't find a buddy or a family friend who could sort you out and let you sit in the corner and see how this is done, and then use that to get yourself angled in, you could pay money to this one bloke who could teach you in his lounge, because that's what Litchfield Law School was. It was the lounge of his house. He had an extension built on later. And he, there was one person was the law school, the first one in the United States, told you everything using the commentaries on the laws of England, don't ask me why, would then educate you on this stuff. And it was for people who wanted to practice by someone who was a knowledgeable practitioner, and that was the purpose. And you see now a kind of, if you look at this kind of two models, and I'll use this for only one more minute, Gitanjali, if you can tolerate me. These two models do very much exist, and they stand starkly in the US. We have a lot of law schools that are only thinking about their mission is for creating lawyers and getting people up to the bar to practice and get out and do that. Of course, we're all to some degree doing that. Heavy competition, very difficult to distinguish between who is doing that kind of thing better, all getting up to the same bar. And then there's this kind of limited group of schools that are going beyond that, that look above and where that project is. What's the use of these two models? I think they're both of them are wrong, so I think we shouldn't do either. We should have some combination of both. And if we're only doing an exercise of kind of a purely academic, divorced from practice, maybe engaging with other disciplines, we could have kind of really interesting things to say to each other, but they'll then lose a connectedness, a rootedness in the institutions that we are theorizing and talking about. So that is a particular problem. And one of those tricks that we miss pre-COVID is that the legal sector in every country, developed and non-developed, is moving in technology. Law technology is a massive thing. If you're not kind of beginning to think about technology and e-commerce and other types of things, then you are well and truly living on another planet, because everywhere from Burundi to everywhere else is moving in this direction. It's something that law schools need to begin to be doing more stuff about. And the other thing is, in terms of practice, is in engaging across different legal systems. People can, like or not like, various things and going on in different countries' legal systems. But China and India and America and others are not going anywhere. The EU, people need to know about these things. And the big firms in Delhi, the big firms in London, and the big firms in New York are trading with each other, and we need to have some greater familiarity. It's not enough just to be good, knowing some things about things on the ground in one jurisdiction. We need to go beyond that. We know that and do that well, both by connecting with what's going on in practice, that kind of view of law, thank you, as a kind of a glorified apprenticeship kind of program. So it's important that we keep our roots. That's very important, though that's not a veto on what we do. It's just a kind of a sense check as to where things are going. Of course, not all our students will want to be lawyers and will go to be lawyers, and that's not bad. That's not bad. We should keep in mind that as well. And then on the other side, of course, that connectedness to the academic study. So I think when we think these things together about where our sector is in terms of legal services, right, where law is, to get that right, law is interdisciplinary, thoroughgoing by its nature. That thoroughgoing interdisciplinarity is not just about connecting to economics and philosophy and other things. It is also connecting to different types of systems, and that there's various things changing. Its relation to technology. is changing, you know, which is the way advocacy works in a court has changed in every country, Right. You know, one of my colleagues is a Chinese lawyer. We have a Center for Chinese Law here, and you know, hits a button, boom! I'm seeing all these administrative courtrooms in China talking in English, and live. Not all of them, but a number. And this is different. This is different, and we need to be alive to all of that. That's my thought.
Thank you. Thank you. That I think you put out a lot of different things for us to think about. You know, what exactly is the sweet spot in some ways for a law school? In fact, one of the audience questions that's just come to me is, you know, so what is a course going to look like? What is an interdisciplinary course actually going to look like? Is it going to be highly theoretical? And therefore, I think the question also suggests unemployable. The person comes out of it unemployable. Or is it going to be practice oriented, which has its own issues? But we'll get to that question. Can we have, can I invite Professor Coles to make her comments? And then Professor Mohan and Professor Pandey, I think, can just follow from there.
Yes, just to pick on, thank you, just to pick up on the that point you were talking about earlier on. And my point had been that all these challenges are our strengths. That was the word that, yeah. And it's our strengths. That's what I was looking for. And it's our strengths because it forces us, encourages us to bring in the different understandings of the pure scientist, of the politician. All these areas have different ontological approaches to the way that they learn and their awareness of knowledge. I think I would follow up on the point that Professor Brooks said about the use of various techniques that we could do within universities, and it kind of answers the point in terms of what will a university degree look like, is the value of the placement opportunity. So really having a look around at the universities that embed that, not only as a sort of add-on, but some universities are embedding that within the modules, and you're doing assessment based on the placement. The other aspect is you really using the diversity within your university. So making sure that your staff are diverse, not only in their disciplines, but also in their perspectives, in their origins, and put that for the students as well. So international students and their contribution that they make, and in all the different areas, will be really key there as well. So, and then finally, what I would make in what a degree will look like is there is a huge change that I'm not sure whether your participants are up to speed with in the UK LLB, in the strict regulation of it has very much been relaxed. So the UK is moving away from 7 key subjects that you must teach starting in a couple of years' time. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity of putting different sorts of modules. Maybe they may be some philosophy-based, some regulation-based, some business-based. Many universities have law clinics where people can practice not only giving that legal advice, but also the communication and the sensitivity and the kindness and support that, again, COVID is showing us that's so important. So to answer the question, what would a university degree actually start to look like? I bring back it should be something that calls on the strengths of the pure scientist, the finance, the regulator, but also the ethical, philosophical areas, put that in, as well as the practical experience that might come from a placement, practical experience and social experience coming from the sort of clinical education, the idea where the student is acting as an advisor, and do have a look at the huge change that's impacting every UK law school, because it's coming from the national regulator, that they're opening the doors to UK law degrees to have much more diversity and difference within their modules. So that's my answer to the question.
Thank you. I saw that I have the word strengths written right at the top of the list of things, and somehow I just couldn't find it when I needed it. Yeah, I mean, not to be facetious about this, but you know, it is we've heard before that we shouldn't let a good crisis go to waste. So maybe this is I think what I'm hearing for all of you is that this is actually the right time for us to start rethinking legal education in certain ways to deal with these kinds of issues this is probably not going to be the last one, right? Professor Mohan.
Yeah, so I'll from being more of an optimist, I'll be more cautious in the degree of optimism. And I say that because I think the way, at least I'm seeing it, the way higher educational institutions are, looking at this is less of an opportunity, but more temporarily trying to sail our way through this. There are very less structural changes being made in really adopting technology in making education accessible. I'm seeing this entirely in context to, India has no homogeneous structures. There are 3 Indias that you can look at within the country. So I'm just talking about the one which is right at the bottom of the pyramid. Professor Pande has pointed out a couple of points already. And I think till the time as I said, our process of knowledge creation does not transcend from a coded dictionary to a more perceptive and intuitive pursuit. I think this is the way it is going to be. You have systems of teaching and learning which are largely focused, as Professor Brooks pointed out, on coded knowledge. And particularly this is true of legal education per se. Procedural, institutional, how is that I can get an extension on a date in the course? What happens to sentencing? How do you file an appeal? Yes, as important as that is, if you're trying to expand on the intuitive base of a student and make him or her more perceptive, sensory, intuitive, in a more Eastern knowledge sense, karmic, all of those structures of knowledge processes need greater exposure. And I think that, yes, clinical education is a way forward, but where are the incentives? You have to ask yourself the question. I say this to students all the time. In Jindal itself, there are many students who do clinical courses, but they don't see the incentive. They want to end up in a corporate and commercial legal firm. And you don't blame them. Why? We all made those choices ourselves at some points of time in our respective pursuits. So I'm seeing COVID or a pandemic as a tight slap in our faces. We really need to look at what are we trying to do here. There is a crisis in hand, and I'm going to take just a quick minute to say and just expand what Professor Pande quite eloquently put out. That 3 major areas where lawyers and legal, when I'm saying lawyers, I'm talking about those who are interested in the pursuit of litigation, and those who are already exposed to legal education, both would want to get a better understanding of. The first is economic and social rights and issues around economic and social rights. Just talking about rights and the classic Bentham and Hart divide, we are right now in a governance system, I'll be honest and I'll speak out loud there, which sees rights as children of law, not as parents of law. This is the debate that Bentham and Hart had on what did we see as rights to be. So this is not a very rights-based social system or political system of our pursuits. To give you an example, Model Tenancy Act, Madhya Pradesh, a state in central part of India, they invited me for a consultation to see whether this was just 3 days ago, and they're passing a law so that can make rental housing more affordable for people. This is a realization made from the massive migrant seasonal labor crisis that saw chunks and chunks of people moving out, not being able to come back. And it was not a crisis of the lockdown, it was a crisis of a rental housing availability. People couldn't stay at their homes and they had to leave their vacation, wherever they were staying. Now, what happened as a result of this was that when I saw the act, the Tenancy Act, it has absolutely no mention of the social context in which we are a part of. When I say that, what it means is it takes neutral terms like a tenant and a landlord and brings out very eloquently the structure and the language of law. The main issue is not of the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. It's about those who do find it difficult to get rental housing or housing per se. That's single working women, people from certain communities, classes, And there's nothing that was mentioned there. And we created a structure of conversation around that to build the, and you'll be surprised to know very few legal minds on the platform were even, saying, well, let's do this. The idea was, listen, we need to get this done in 24 hours and we're getting this fast. So this is the way things get done, right, in the system where we are looking at. The second is healthcare, which was also pointed out. ASHA workers, this is the accredited healthcare social activist class. I am talking day in and day out to an average 30 people as a part of a team to understand what ASHA workers are going through. They haven't been paid and you'd be surprised to know the average pay was less than.
Deepanshu, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but would you like to just explain what an ASHA worker is?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. So the ASHA worker starts for an accredited social healthcare activist. This is the main medical service provider for ensuring that all maternal deliveries happen institutionally in public healthcare systems. They are technically, in legal terms, considered a volunteer and are paid a stipend. So they have no access to minimum wages. All they're paid is rupees 2,000. I think that would roughly come to around, what, 30 to 35 US dollars a month. And they have not been paid 30 to 35 US dollars a month for the last 5 months. On an average, I'm talking about in the state of UP where we try, and there's enough sample there. So when I say this, I mean, if you're really trying to improve healthcare and talk about rights of medical service providers, at least understand what they're going through. What was on the contrary happening, any ASHA worker who resigned or confessed or put out this as a complaint was not only let go, was charged with the police criminal act right here. I'm just talking about how law is being used in that sense. The final point is on justice. And to anyone who's asking, how do we learn and how do we teach students? I mean, I'm just reading 2 quotes and any one of you may be probably able to guess this. Quote 1, liberal requirements of justice include a strong component of equality among citizens, but that is a specifically political demand, which applies to the basic structure of a unified nation state. Humanitarian duties hold in virtue of the absolute rather than the relative level need of the people we are in a position to help. Justice, by contrast, is concerned with the relations between the conditions of different classes of people and the causes of inequality between them. This is Rawls. And I see this a potential for a sociologist, an economist, a legal scholar, a political scientist, all to make out something from what has been said here. That is the way you have to try imparting knowledge where you are discussing a concept in the process of its social context and political context and economic context, right? The final quote is one which I don't know if you'd probably guess, and I'm going to ask any one panelist to maybe guess this. Justice, the last and greatest of the 4 cardinal virtues, took place according to this system when each of the 3 faculties of the mind, prudence, benevolence, and propriety, confined itself to its proper office, without attempting to encroach upon that of any other. When reason directed and passion obeyed, and when each passion performed its proper duty and exerted itself towards its proper object, which was suitable to the value of what it pursued. Can anyone guess who's this? This is Adam Smith in the Theory of Moral Sentiments. And we see Adam Smith as the founding father of what? Modern economic thinking. So there's a lot for us to, I think, go back. And I think for each one of us to go back to our own disciplines and learn more about that. Before we, I mean, these conversations are just one of the pathways. But that's what I think I'll probably pause there and we'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepanshu. I think the importance of social research is something you very, very firmly established there. Lots to talk about, but I'm so sorry that we need to move on. Professor Pandey, would you like to comment?
I think Sir is on mute.
Professor Pandey, you're on mute. You'll need to unmute yourself. सुनाई नहीं दे रहा आपका आवाज.
The idea in the sense that it is not what conflict of law has already one system of law interacting with another system of law, another autonomous system, civil law system, and another, and people doing it only for the sake of limited corporate practice. Not that. When I say interdisciplinary knowledge, it has to be a revisiting of legal knowledge, which has not been done. That's why I say pandemic is a blessing. This has given us an opportunity, this has given us a challenge that we, once for all, I had a discussion with Raj the moment this migrant problem surfaced. And I said, Raj, it is high time we should set up a center for migrant legal and sociological studies in Jindal Global Law School. All sociological, all economic, all legal problems of the migrant population. Who are the people? Why they migrate? Why they walk back in millions? Now, this is the kind of knowledge that we have to, knowledge generators have a very heavy responsibility. It is much more than what UK model has been practicing, what even Professor Brooks is talking about. It is much more. You have to generate, you have to bring together ideas from economics, from philosophy, from sociology, and then give to legal education a new perspective, a new way of looking to human needs, a new way of looking to human wants. I remember a long time back when this food right petition was being argued in the Supreme Court. I had done some work on food rights, and Senior Singhvi Saab, he was arguing for them, and he wanted my notes for arguing in that Kishan Patnaik case, Kalahandi petitions. And I made them available to him. But I at the same time thought the legal profession is so distanced from the problem of hungry people, people who need food. Why? Why should it happen? And then later on, the Human Rights Commission took up, Justice Verma, J.S. Verma, the chairman, he took up and he said, Pandit, we have passed an order. So that is the idea. Interdisciplinary knowledge will have to dig into new areas and bring in together new knowledges, new awarenesses, which has been for the first time underscored and brought to us by this pandemic. That's why I call it a blessing. This knowledge has come, Greta Thunberg had been talking about it on the environmental plane. But this time, this came in a much stronger warning. And this is time for us to revamp the whole legal education system itself. And therefore, I call it a big challenge for the knowledge dispensers, those who will generate knowledge, who will create this kind of new legal linkages and collaborate with people, economics, philosophy, sociology, and look to the society around us. Mohan, this young scholar has been very impressive. He has been talking of Chhattisgarh problems, the problems of the housing, these are the problems that have to come on board. They've been ignored for much too long. They've been just skirted under the carpet, but that should not happen. And law has been talking of autonomy, of higher problems. And I remember Albert Hart in one of his quotes saying that the problem of dispossessed and the problem of we are not bothered about them because they can care not to bother about them. Legal system, if you make for only people who are haves only, what about the have-nots? They will struggle. So I think this interdisciplinary knowledge to me is a very pious and a very big challenge that needs to be met right
Thank
now.
you.
And tomorrow may be too late because our system will become irrelevant for us, for the society, larger society. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pandey. Actually, you know, we don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to take one or two of the audience questions. We've covered a lot of the ground that in terms of questions that have come, but there is one. If I could just ask you all to make a quick 1.5 minute comment, although it's not it's the kind of issue where we could probably go on for some time. Sorry about this, but it is what it is. The discourse on the relationship between climate change and zoonotic diseases has gained traction during the pandemic. Do you see this as an area of potential interdisciplinary scholarship and partnerships? Could I ask Professor Atienza to start? Give us a quick comment.
Thank you. Yes, very much. And we have seen already in the past few years, and we will see more multidisciplinary programs, for example, in the area of sustainability, from a legal perspective, from a management and business perspective, as well as from an economy and an environmental perspective.
Professor Coles, thank you. Professor Coles?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the strength to our knowledge and our understanding of looking at an issue from all these different aspects is going to be the way forward. The issues are global, and therefore we need to tackle them in a global way, and that includes not only global in terms of nationhood, but also in terms of subject matter. And that's the way I think we will. I'm confident that we will be able to solve them, but we'll need everything we've got all together.
Thank you. I mean, actually, one of the maybe interdisciplinary things that have come out of the environmental challenge has been environmental humanities, actually, just sort of looking at, and it's sort of separate rubric altogether. Professor Brooks.
Yes, and I think one of the things to kind of try to say something a little different but complementary is one thing is not only do students have a greater interest in these issues, not only are we're all now not experts, but we're all more knowledgeable about coronavirus structures than we were 6 months, 8 months ago, which itself is interesting. What's also fascinating is it's raised another issue that's related. A lot of people wonder about, could we really, a lot of people, accept the scientific consensus on climate change, believe we need to do things, some questions as to which areas should be talking to each other more and other types of things. But one thing that has been really interesting is that people wonder, would they really be that shocked? Would we really be willing to kind of change our fundamental lifestyles, like not being in cars, use buses less, work from home, other ways of working. And we've been seeing kind of a dramatic decreases in carbon emissions and other things, which has been remarkable. So not only do I think that there's this opportunity now, greater interest, knowledge, and all the rest of it, which is a great way of spurring people to want to collaborate more. And when that happens from the bottom up, other things that follow that are good. At the same time, the other thing about climate change of actually trying to stop it or do something about it, it seems that we've been making some progress on that, and long may that continue.
Thank you so much, Professor Brooks. Professor Mohan, quick comment?
Yeah, well, just, I mean, climate change, let's start from where we teach. I think as an experiment, we did this last year where I just took students for the class back in our campus. And I was taking the class half of the time in the sun. And then I could see everyone sweating, bullocks, like almost. And after half an hour, I asked them, well, are you comfortable? And they were like, well, of course not. Why are we not inside the classrooms? I can now justify saying that social distancing norms can justify taking classes outside if the weather allows you to do so. But then they said, well, we can go under a tree and do the rest of the session there. And we did exactly that. And I said, well, now you understand why trees are important, not around on campus, but just the place. And you'd be surprised too, these are graduate students. They don't need to be told this verbally, but when it becomes a part of your lived experience of sorts, it just makes, we generate the maximum amount of waste in the entire Sonipat area, that is as a university. But we are also kind of having the largest green cover presence. So there's a lot that we can do, but as I said, this is a good point. Take sessions more where you can. I know at Durham and other places, maybe it's difficult doing that with the cold, but where you can, I think just make the lived perceptive experience of students to be more engaged with nature.
Yeah,
Right?
this is reminding me of the environmental law. One of my colleagues who teaches environmental law, his very first class took his students for a bird walk around campus. And it was very successful, actually. Professor Pandey, the final word is yours.
I think that, to my mind, this interdisciplinary knowledge, knowledge of future that I have in my mind, knowledge that has not been in existence so far, or it is only in patches, will not only serve the lawyers and the judges, will also serve the legal policymakers, will also serve the legal administrators, will serve the media, will serve and have a more enlightened society ultimately. Therefore, this interdisciplinary knowledge is different from merely a law course knowledge that we are acquainted with at the present. Maybe that's a very far-fetched and a very ambitious thing for an old man like me to think of it and dream. It is a dream which may never come true, because legal education holds its grounds and very strongly it holds its ground. But my plea is that legal education requires a revamp, a thorough revamp. And that is a legal education that will be more acceptable in the society, that will create a future society where legal policy makers, legal will be more attracted towards legal studies ultimately.
Great. Thank you. I think that's an excellent note to end on. Thank you so much. You know, I think we have to move on to the next session, but I'd like to thank all of our wonderful speakers. I think that we could have extended this session to a couple of hours more, maybe at least, and, you know, got into greater details about various things. But I think you've all brought in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gitanjali.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Dean Thom Brooks, Professor Pandey, Professor Coles, and of course, DEEPANSHU. Obviously, as Gitanjali said, I echo her thoughts and deeply appreciate your presence. We are, of course, immediately moving to the next session. I look forward to hosting all of you on campus in India. Thank you very much.